Thank you, Senator Rosen. Senator Kaine, it appears that you are finally recognized.
I've been enlightened by the questions that have come before me, and glad that I heard my colleagues. Ms. Sutton, in your testimony in response, I think, to a question of Senator Budd's, you talked a little bit about our allies and partners and how cybersecurity is something where there should be burden sharing, and there should be, but there's also real opportunities in work with allies and partners, not just to share the burden, but to take advantage of the expertise of other nations. I've been particularly involved in this committee and in the Foreign Relations Committee on the AUKUS framework. Could you talk a little bit about, kind of your view about the upsides, not just in the sense of sharing the burden, but the capacities of some of our allies, and how, sometimes the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. If we work with allies on cyber issues, we can be stronger.
Senator, I appreciate that question. The United States has a strong innovative advantage with the talent that we have, but we certainly do not have a monopoly on that talent. And I think partnerships with some of our close partners and allies, particularly the Australians through the AUKUS Pillar 2, which allows us to do cooperative research and development agreements, is going to be really important so that we can ensure that we're able to share the latest and greatest technology, but also that we're able to prioritize our investments where that we're not duplicating efforts. And so working closely with all of our partners, but in particularly utilizing the AUKUS agreement, will be critical in bringing the technology we need to our warfighters.
Thank you. I'm really glad that you brought up AUKUS Pillar 2. Pillar 1 is, fairly discrete. It's about the production of Virginia-class subs, the training and the Aussies about how to operate and maintain them, and eventually working with the Aussies so that they can develop their own capacity to build nuclear subs of their own design, which would include a lot of U.S. technology, obviously. Pillar 2 is a little more open-ended, which is good, but it also means we have to, kind of define what are going to be some of the deliverables in Pillar 2, and I do think cyber cooperation is one of the areas that is probably the most fertile for Pillar 2 work, both with the Aussies and with the UK, and I'm encouraged to hear you bring that up. I want to follow up, too, on a discussion that Senator King and you had that I have heard many, many times in this committee, and I'm not really sure that we're as far down the road as we need to be, and that is the offensive nature of our cyber capacity. You used the phrase, we have the capacity to impose costs. But I often wonder if we are imposing costs. Your point that the defender has to be right every time, the attacker only has to be right once. We do have a good cyber defense. We're not perfect. We have a good cyber defense. And the fact that we're not perfect means a couple of times a year there's a story about some cyber hacker getting into some part of the U.S. government or some critical infrastructure in the United States. And those stories are very public, and the public hears them, and the public's worried about cyber. We talk about offensive operations in other military domains. The number of sorties we were flying against ISIL, we know. When there's a U.S. bombing in Yemen against Houthis, we're aware of it. But we don't talk about what we do offensively in cyber very much. I think there's some reasons for that, but it ends up making the public very aware that we're under attack because the news stories a couple times a year about successful cyber attacks, but the public never hears about our use of the offensive cyber capacity to impose costs on those who are attacking us. Why can't we be a little more candid with the American public about our offensive use of cyber so that they're aware that we're not just playing defense all the time, but that we actually have an offensive capacity that we use?
Senator, that's a great question. I appreciate the opportunity to address it today. As you mentioned, we have decades of experience talking about things like nuclear deterrence. And in the area of cyber, we are still going down that path of evolution, and I think there's a lot of work still to be done. A decade ago, we barely even mentioned the word offensive cyber. Today, many discussions, as you mentioned, in this area are to start having the right discussions to ensure that we're understanding and that we set the right posture, and look forward to being able to continue that dialogue. I think there's a bit of a culture change Just as we've seen a culture change when we used to see threats in the cyberspace, we just kept them. Through establishment of things like the NSA Cyber Collaboration Center, we now work very hard to take what we see in the cyber domain and share it with industry so that they can defend. I think that same culture change needs to happen in how we discuss cyber deterrence.
I look forward to working with you on this. Deterrence only works if it's public. That's part of what deters. People are aware there are going to be consequences, and they believe it. And our public needs to understand as well that we're not just the victims of cyber attacks, but that we have a well-developed capacity to impose costs. I look forward to working with you on that, and I yield back.
Thank you.